the son will always see him as the same person. Doesn't matter if he's in a business outfit, if he's in, relaxed home outfit, if he's whatever the circumstances, you always see the same person, but just in a different light. So it's very nice. And Prabhupada actually discusses in the purport, again as background to this, that foolish persons, or also the Vedavadis, persons who are just interested in sacrificial performance, but they don't actually understand the whole context. That they consider incarnations such as Varahadev to be anthropomorphism. So, anthropomorphism, as we know, is a conception that you're attributing personal or human characteristics on an inanimate object or on an animal or other kind of living entity. Like examples of that are like, you see, for example, these cartoons with trees, and the trees have like smiley face, and the tree is speaking and saying, please don't cut me down. So that's an example. Or we say, it's a raging storm out there. It's like a very angry storm going on. So obviously, that's a perfect example. But obviously, as devotees, we can more clearly understand that. But from the atheistic or materialistic position, if you see, it's kind of reasonable. But if you see a, divine boar, what we would claim, that it would be kind of bewildering or confusing. Like, how can you claim a boar, as God? Like, what is that? So, but it actually makes perfect sense. How can you claim that, he has personal forms, he has personal varied expansions, that God can be like that? So, but it actually makes perfect sense, because our personality, our individual qualities in nature and activities and everything, since we have that, it makes perfect sense that God would have that. As we discover 15.7 Bhagavad Gita, Mamaivangso Jiva Loke, Jiva Bhuta Sanatana Manaksashrani Indriyani, Prakriti Stani Karshati. What Krishna is saying there, that the living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they're struggling very hard with the six senses, including the mind. And Prabhupada, clearly describes in that purport that the personal expansions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the individual identities of the Godhead, are always present. Similarly, the separated expansions of living entities have their identities. As fragmental parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, the living entities also have fragmental portions of His qualities, of which independence is one. Every living entity as an individual soul has his personal individuality and a minute form of independence. By misuse of that independence, one becomes a conditioned soul, and by proper use of independence, he is always liberated. In either case, he is qualitatively eternal. So, we have this analogy of the apple and the apple and the tree. So, it makes perfect sense that if we're coming from something, whatever you call it, that we would have similar qualities to that. So therefore, it makes perfect sense also that we would have, personality, characteristic traits, and all kinds of things that are also present within God. Not necessarily that, because their conception will be that, well, you're putting that on, God, or you're putting that on Krishna. But actually, we would claim it's quite the opposite. You're claiming that God is limited, but how can you understand something limited with your limited senses? You can claim that. You can say that, well, God, how can God have a form? How can God have qualities? How can God be a person? All these things. But it's quite illogical, because you're making a claim of something you don't have direct access to, unless you're a devotee, obviously. Then there's different understanding. But for the atheists, they actually can't comment on these kinds of things in a logical way. So, yeah, more strictly coming back to this verse, that was a bit of a background. It's interesting in this text and in this verse, sacrifice, I don't know how many times it's mentioned, like maybe 20 times sacrifice is mentioned. And I thought this was a very important point because hearing a lot of classes from Srila Prabhupada, he talks about sacrifice all the time. And it kind of struck me because generally when you hear the word sacrifice, what do you think? Yagya, yeah. You think of some like very complicated ritual, some many brahmanas sitting around and like very serious and like swaha and so much, different arrangements. That's generally what we think when we hear the word sacrifice, or generally yagya. But it's interesting, Srila Prabhupada and our acharyas, they, almost to the extent of minimizing that kind of sacrifice, which is yagya, almost every time they expand it, and they include sacrifice of your work, sacrifice of your time, sacrifice of your money, sacrifice of your intelligence, of your consciousness, all these kinds of things, the mind. So it's quite interesting. There's kind of this, dichotomy going on, that when you hear, yagya, 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 and especially for those that are not so learned in, our sampradaya, or that are in our sampradaya and are therefore learned, when you say yagya, like in the context of Indian culture or whatever, oh yes, yagya, yes, this kind of thing. But it's actually much, much broader, and for us the emphasis is quite different, actually. And yeah, it's mentioned that there's different kinds of sacrifice, not in the technical sense, but in the sense of the modes. So, sacrifice that's transcendental, it will be one that liberates one actually from this world, not one that entangles one here. And that it's beneficial for one spiritually. It bestows, obviously, bhakti. And it's following transcendental scriptures. So then we also have sacrifice in the mode of goodness. And so Srila Prabhupada talks about all these. It's beneficial for everyone. It's following a shastra, but it's not transcendental necessarily. Then we have sacrifice in passion. Has a selfish motive. It's, it's fruitive. It's like, I give one for Krishna, I give one for me. I give 2 for Krishna, I give 2 for me. I give 3 for Krishna, I give 4 for me. It starts getting contaminated actually over time. And then we have sacrifice in ignorance. So it's destructive, it's harmful. Like we see animal sacrifices, things like this, when performed improperly. That's why they're not allowed to be performed in Kali, or not supposed to be performed in Kali. People are still doing it, but that's quite foolish. So, of course, yeah, for Vaishnavas, we are trying to perform transcendental sacrifice in all of our acts, with our consciousness, with our mind, and especially, as mentioned here, by performing Sankirtan Yagya. So, again, Prabhupada in his purport mentions the Vedavadis. So, yeah, they mention that there's nothing more than the Vedas and the performances of sacrifice mentioned in the Vedas. They've recently made a rule in their group to formally observe daily sacrifice. They simply ignite a small fire and offer something whimsically, but they do not strictly follow the sacrificial rules and regulations mentioned in the Vedas. So, yeah, this is an example. It's kind of just like a meaningless performance. It's to show off how very, very ritualistic we are, or how many performances we follow. But they're missing the essence. They're missing the whole point, which is mentioned in this verse. In the Sanskrit, they mention the word Isha, means, O Lord. They're addressing O Lord, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, you are this of sacrifice, you are that of sacrifice. So that's a proper understanding that the sacrifice is actually meant to offer respect, offer worship to Krishna. That's the core principle of yajna, of sacrifice. And without that, Prabhupada's saying, without that one cannot achieve the results of sacrifice. One actually can't understand the benefit of what they're doing, and they actually can't achieve that benefit. So yeah, this Vedavadi process, it's simply like a mechanical performance with selfish motives, give this, give that, which, if you think about it, it's kind of like this example given by Prabhupada of donkeys and the washerman, that you're doing something very difficult. You're carrying a very heavy load on your back, but you're not really getting the benefit. The washerman is feeding a few, handfuls of grass here and there to the donkey, but that's available everywhere. If he would just give up his heavy load, and God's providing grass everywhere. So if the Vedavadis, would just surrender, would just take up the process of transcendental yajna, bhakti, then actually the desired result would be easily achieved. Something that was very interesting. When I first read this verse, immediately it kind of struck me as being like a correlation to the Purusha Shukta, because these Vedic texts from Rig Veda or other places, they generally pop up in all throughout the Puranas and the Itihasas and things, but not necessarily in that direct form of the way that they're mentioned. But the themes are there because it's a whole culture actually behind the Vedic literatures. It's not just like separate individual things. So, but there was a key similarity which I found interesting, that, and it's also there in Bhagavad Gita in this, what is it? Brahmarpanam, Brahma Havir, that shloka, that God's not separate from yajna, but actually He is the sacrifice. He's actually present in the sacrifice. He's present in the process, and He's also the result. So, it's quite interesting. We're performing bhakti yoga, which is, actually given by the blessings of Krishna or God and His devotees. So it's given by Him, and what we're doing is we're remembering Him, and the goal is we want to come to Him. The goal is that we actually get Him. But, as it's mentioned, unless one has respect, this is in the purport, unless one has respect for the incarnation of the Lord, he cannot perform sacrifice. That means that one who's not devotee, his offering actually won't be accepted. His connection with Krishna through whatever so-called yajna won't be successful, because there's no relationship, there's no respect for the Lord. Just like if I'm trying to serve you prasadam, and you're sitting there, you're expecting at least some basic respect. Would you like this? Would you like that? If I'm serving you prasadam and I just start dumping random things on your plate in random orders, you're not going to be very happy, and you won't feel inclined to accept that. So in the same way with Krishna, when we're serving Him, there has to be, or there should be, that very personal and intimate desire to serve Him. Not that we're just cooking and just throwing whatever spices and smashing something up that's supposed to be very delicate, and burn the milk. Oh, it doesn't matter, anyway, he's just a statue. No, there has to be that very personal, intimate desire that I want to serve you, I want to please you, I want to do actually what you like rather than what I like or what I want to get out of this. So, sacrifice or yajna in the broad sense, not just in the ritualistic sense, it actually means to put God in His rightful position in our hearts, to actually accept that he's our worshipable object. He's the one who deserves all of these things. He's the one who deserves respect. He deserves glorification. Of course, our conditioned nature, we always feel that, well, I deserve respect. I deserve worship. When someone cuts you off when you're driving, the immediate instinct isn't, oh, it's just Krishna's arrangement. Different shlokas come to the mind that should not be uttered. So we have to fight very hard against that conditioned nature to put ourselves in the center, and actually that's the meaning of yajna, of sacrifice. And as I was mentioning with the Mamai Vangso verse, which connects to this, is that we have this independence, which is coming from Krishna. He's supremely independent. He's not bound by any limitations. So we also have that minute independence, and by that same independence, we have become bound, and by that same independence, we can become liberated. It's it functions both ways. So it just depends how exactly we want to use it. If we want to believe and try to establish, which will never work, it's quite funny, but try to establish ourselves as supreme and as the enjoyer and as the Lord of all cosmos, or if we want to just accept the truth and put Krishna in that position in our heart. I also was thinking, because reading these verses, the word yajna, sacrifice, or it comes up again and again and again. And so I also, perform yajna, the ritualistic kind. But I was thinking that when I do these sacrificial performances, we do it strictly in our parampara, in our sampradaya, because we do have a process of yajna which is required in sacrificial yajna for the sake of, what do you call it, sacrament, or like priestly rituals that help to kind of create this samskara in the mind. Actually, that's the meaning of samskara. It's creating an impression that I'm taking initiation now, and I have to follow these rules, I have to follow these regulations, so I better take it seriously. And how am I going to take it seriously? Am I just going to say, oh yeah, I'm going to chant 16 rounds for the rest of my life and give up all material desires and follow these 4 regular principles and like all these things I could enjoy? Yeah, I'm just not going to do that. No, we actually have a very formal ceremony where it creates a lasting impression in the consciousness that I'm taking this up, and so on and so forth. So, when performing these sacrifices, it's interesting because generally I try to do them for just devotees, but you always have pious people who are coming to the temple, and they, oh, can we have yajna, can we have havan at our home? And, you want to connect them to the temple. So, but it's interesting because their conception is that, well, we'll get some like pious benefit, and we'll have devotees over, it's nice, so it's good intention. But generally the concept of what they really want to get out of it is quite different than what I'll be thinking of. When I'm going to perform one of these yajnas, I'm actually more thinking that, well, we're going to go there and we're going to perform the sacrifice, and I put it up like on a TV, all the mantras. I say, okay, we're going to do a yajna now, but you have to chant all the mantras while we're doing it. So what ends up happening is they chant the whole Mangala Charana. They chant, depending on which yajna, but they chant the whole Mangala Charana, so they're chanting the prayers to all of our acharyas, praying for their blessings and benediction. They chant prayers to Lord Chaitanya, Panchatattva Mahamantra, and Panchatattva Atmakam Krishnam, so on. They chant the Mahamantra a lot. I make sure we do that a lot. They might chant the Nrsimha Kavacha mantras, or whatever it is, Brahma Samhita. So they're thinking that, I'll get some, piety, and, my family will be blessed, and all these kinds of things. But, what we're actually trying to do is actually give them the real thing that's going to give them benefit, which is Sankirtan Yajna. These performances generally are very faulty. They have so many. Actually, we can't perform yajna, in this age. We say this again and again and again, but if you really study the Pancharatrika agamas and the rituals, it's so complicated. It's impossible. Maybe 1 in 100 million people is actually qualified by having, samskars performed from the point of birth, and they know all the mantras properly. And because with these mantras used in yajna, also they're in Daivi Sanskrit. They're not in Lokic Sanskrit. So it's not, just as easy as, Shraktundashit Shuravishanashayar. But each syllable has an intonation, you need to chant it. And if you chant it in the wrong intonation, you get a completely different meaning, like we hear in the 10th canto with this pastime with Vritrasura, right? So it's impossible. No one can perform these yajnas in this age. But they don't understand this, therefore we have to, transcendentally trick them. That, yeah, we'll do a havan, we'll do a yajna, but you have to chant all these mantras, because otherwise there'll actually be no success in the performance. So Prabhupada really brings it home right at the end of the purport, and he quotes this 11th canto. What is it? Krishna Sankirtana. Yagya Sankirtana. I'm forgetting it, but Yajanti Hisumedasa, yeah. The one who's actually intelligent, they worship the form, they worship the Lord in this form of Sankirtan Yagya, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, what he's bringing to give. And I thought it was very nice because there's a similar verse, it's almost the same, with the stress of it. But it's Bhagavatam 12th canto, 3rd chapter, 52. It's Kritayadhyayato Vishnum Tretayam Yajato Makai Dvapare Paricharyayam Kalodhad Hari Kirtanat. It's that whatever result was obtained in Satya Yuga by meditating on Vishnu, in Treta Yuga by performing sacrifices, and in Dvapara Yuga by serving the Lord's lotus feet, can be obtained in Kali Yuga simply by chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. So simple, And Prabhupada mentions a very nice part in that purport that, in conclusion, massive propaganda should be made all over the world to induce people to chant the Hare Krishna mantra, by which human society can be rescued from the dangerous ocean of the age of Kali. Which really, it hits home. I mean, when you look around in modern society, there's danger at every side. There's it's just every single aspect of modern materialistic life is designed to entangle you in this world. You go out, you see billboards. It's always one of multiple things which I don't have to describe because we all know. But none of them are spiritual. Almost never. And if it is somewhat spiritual, it'll be one religion or the other trying to blast you with their propaganda that, surrender to so-and-so, otherwise you're going to hell, or this or that. But we don't see billboards, perform Krishna Sankirtan, this yajna is the real thing, or whatever. We just don't see that. Because, this age of Kali is a very dangerous ocean. And it's not a safe place. So this Sankirtan Yajna, the real Yajna, is, it's a sacrifice. It's not that it just happens automatically. You sit down, you put your hand in your bead bag, and blah, 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 blah. Or you go with devotees and you have, instruments, and you just get together and have a great time and smash them away. And it's not, it's simple, but you actually have to put the effort. You have to do it. You have to sacrifice your time. You have to sacrifice your attention and your consciousness, really. You have to sacrifice putting your love, putting your service in the right place. Because, that's the nature of our souls. We want to love. We want to have relationship. We want to serve. But it's being confused in so many ways in this material world. It's being diverted into so many things, which is a distraction. But actually just putting it in the right place, being offered at the lotus feet of Krishna and the holy name, that's really what satisfies the soul. And that's actually what we're looking for. So that's why this Sankirtan Yaga is so important. So if we have any comments or questions, this would be a appropriate time, because the worst offense is it should be added as like an 11th offense to make devotees late for breakfast. So I want to make sure we don't do that. So yes, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranams. Thank you for a lovely class. Thank you. There was a point you made early on in your explanation, and I had a realization from this when I was in Italy. Prabhu Das, who was our leader there, he explained it to me, because I was having great difficulty with some of the issues with this particular canto. The different incarnations of the Lord are quite difficult things to understand from our perspective, and the way he explained it to me is it's really more to do with our own perception, our limited vision. And he said, we cannot even see to the edge of the universe, even with our most advanced telescopes. And how can we begin to comprehend something like that? These kind of transcendental matters. That's just a small comment. Hare Krishna, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I mean, oftentimes, scientists or materialistic philosophers will try and criticize us, or criticize religion just in general, or the concept of God. That, how can you say so firmly that there is a God, or there is, a divine person, even not even just God in the broad sense, but a divine person. But to take the stance of atheism, of like there is no God and I know it, and it just doesn't make sense, because they're using a imperialistic method generally, which is limited completely to study of it and experiment. You have to perform an experiment and you see the result. But how can you experiment? How can you study on something you can't control, which is God? You can't control God. You can't measure Him with materialistic instruments. Just like you can't measure the mind. You can't confine it. They just can't study it. But we know we have a mind. We know that we have justice. These are all completely metaphysical things. They're abstract in the sense you can't, we accept there's justice, therefore we have a civilized society where we go out in the street and we're not afraid of being like murdered or whatever. So we have these things which we accept objectively as real. If someone tells you justice is not real, it's just like, sorry, it is. Yeah, it's more real. And can you prove it? It's like, not really, not materially, not with an imperialistic method. You can't prove it. So therefore, in the same way, to claim that there is no God, there's no ultimate reality, prove it. You can't prove it's not there. But by experience in bhakti yoga, we actually can prove it's true, it's real, and that God is there. There is a supreme reality. But you have to do the experiment. You can't come to the conclusion without an experiment. So it's exactly like that. We're so limited, and if we just accept that limited, method and perception, we really are stuck. We don't have anything we can do. So yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. We have time anyway. You perform in yagyas and all this kind of brahmana. I'm always wondering, like in previous ages, Vedas are full of it, like Rig Veda describes these sacrifices. Yeah. And most common thing is sacrificing animal. And if you, for example, read except how Ashwamedha yaga is done, it's just so gruesome, yeah. And it's terrible. And then animals are really agonized. This is not like painless. It's terrible way. So I'm just wondering why Krishna would set up such a medium within that. Like he could choose something else, like because nowadays also people in some part of the world perform, and also different traditional religions still perform these animal sacrifices. So those who read, they may be and they are put away
Bewildered. Yeah.
from like what's that Vedas? I know in this age it's not allowed, but why this way? Why Krishna couldn't make some other way of, not just killing, butchering, blood everywhere.
Yeah, sacrificing
So
flowers.
I don't know. Then it's just a reflection. We could do something else.
Please, yeah.
Yeah. If you look at chapter 17, there are different sorts of sacrifices. And in the mode and passion, goodness and ignorance. And it's an accepted formula to assert the person's nature. If they eat like a hog, they become a hog. It's a certain thing. It is explained. It's to suit each nature. There's a spider. There's a fly. This place is built on that. But they all have a lifetime, and they all have a spirit soul, and they should be respected. Even a slug, you try and avoid. Because it is. It's just. And the thing is, what gets me over anything is a routine. Just keep doing the same thing. And then just be prepared for surprises, which is happening a lot with me. But, I think a routine is your blessing, and accept the mode of material nature because it was created that way for all creatures. And they're all spirit souls.
Thank you, Verdi. I thought some more, a few things I thought also, in addition, was like it is mentioned specifically that in these sacrifices, the living entity, whether it be like a cow or a horse or whatever form of living entity, that they are benefited also spiritually. Not even spiritually, just materially. In their next life, they're given a higher life form. Like, for example, I was just hearing, actually, this morning, Srila Prabhupada's class, where he was saying that when performing one of these yagyas, like, for example, the sacrifice of a goat to Kali on I think it's the full moon night or dark moon night, that when the Purohit, it's kind of weird to say even Purohit because it's such like a mode of ignorance, sacrifice. But when the Purohit is about to kill the goat, that he has to whisper a certain mantra in the goat's ear, which is that, just as now I am killing, or just as now I am taking your life, you will take my life, and you will be benefited, you'll be elevated to a higher birth. Usually it's a human birth. Different sacrifices, kind of different things, but usually it's a human birth. And just as now you're suffering, I will have to suffer. So it's really...
It's just not random animal.
Yeah, right.
He has some condensed karma, and then now we benefited.
Yeah, but it's really foolish when you think about it. It's like, what kind of person would, like shoot themselves in the foot for $100? It's kind of like that. It's like you're sacrificing a goat so you can eat. Usually nowadays it's so you can eat meat. That's all it's about. It's not. They don't really care about the spiritual aspect. It's just sacrificing an animal so you can take the flesh in a so-called permissible way. But then you're going to have to suffer so much down the line. It makes no sense. It's like I'm offering you. Here's this nice sandesh, and please enjoy it. And then afterwards you're going to get extremely sick, and you're going to have to throw it all up again. It's like you wouldn't do it. It's in the same way. These sacrifices are specifically mentioned. They're given for persons who are in the mode of ignorance, and they're worshipping according to that mode. their activities are harmful to others and even to themselves. But just because they're bound within that mode, they have to do it. They have to go in that way. If you tell them just perform Sankirtan Yagya, chant Hare Krishna, be happy. But where's the killing? Where's the blood? Where's the, what do I get out of it? Where's the sweat and blood? Yeah. So they're bound in that nature. It's just how it is. You had one more? Yes, Prabhupada.
Thank you. Just before I ask my question, just on the topic of meat, you mentioned Prabhupada talks about the mantra. So when he talks about the word for flesh, mam sa, he says it means mam means me and sa means the animal. So mam sa karati, the animal eats me. So even embedded in the word mamsa is the karmic cycle.
Yeah.
The question is, going back to the point you make that there's no evidence that God does not exist, but you have to make the effort to do bhakti to prove that he does exist. How would you argue when someone says to you, but listen, there are so many religions in the world, they contradict each other. Why would I even make that initial endeavor to follow what you're suggesting when there's hundreds of other people saying different things? How am I supposed to choose you before everyone else?
Right. That's a great question. Well, there's two things. One is a logical fallacy that, well, you have many religions saying there's God, and they all have different confusing, descriptions. So it's just like if you have one vista, one panoramic scene, but you have many different artists, and they will naturally paint it in a slightly different way. Everyone, love, that's according to love. Everyone has a different perception of reality, or in this sense of like a scene. And so they're going to paint it in different ways. You have someone will use acrylic, and they maybe have kind of a different vision of it. You have someone who uses watercolor, you have someone who uses this, uses that. So definitely they're different, and they might conflict, but that doesn't mean that the thing is unreal because there's different perceptions of it. That it's a logical fallacy. It's one of the mentioned logical fallacies. But then if you answer that question, then the next one is, why choose you guys? Why choose you guys? You wear this clothing that's very different, and you do all these things. So one thing is you judge the fruit by its result. Well, what is our process giving philosophically? Love of God, ultimate happiness, promise of an eternal spiritual personal life, not just that you merge into a light. Which, how attractive is that? That you'll do all this, religious ceremonies and practices throughout your life, and then your result is you get to merge into a light. It's not very attractive for me. There's no promise of, qualities or pastimes or happiness or knowledge, or it's very boring. So you judge it by its result, also in the sense that, not just philosophically, but practically. Apply the process and see how you feel. Prabhupada says, or no, it's not Prabhupada actually, but many devotees will use this language that just suspend your doubt. Just put it aside and try. Just see. Chant Hare Krishna, follow these principles, associate with the devotees, and just see what the result is in your life, how you feel after 6 months, 1 month. What's your difference in consciousness? Is your quality of life improving? That's the real judge, is how does the quality of your life improve? Not materially, not did you get more money because you chanted Hare Krishna? That's not, that is a preaching point for other religions. If you just worship so-and-so, God is good to me today, and you'll get lots of money. But that's, that's motivated. So, philosophically, beyond this life, what will be the result? But even just within this life, you'll become very happy. You'll become clean. Your mind will become clean. That's a huge preaching point for people nowadays. The mind is so contaminated, and it's especially our younger generation. There's so much garbage social media and this and that, and like it's horrible. So your mind will become clean actually, and you'll develop all good qualities. So many things. So okay, we are 1 minute over, so I better finish here before I get cursed by all the brahmanas here, devotees. Grantraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki, Gaura Premanandi. Hare Krishna.